Hi, everyone. Welcome to Giant Leaps for Brandkind. Today, I have a guest I'm really excited about. Aneesah Williams is a brand marketing expert and also a DE&I consultant. And she has worked with some of the most recognizable brands in the world. And she is here to share some advice for every business, kind of explain how DE&I fits into the brand experience, explain what brand experience is and what it means, and how it kind of connects to revenue and your customer, and everything else. So welcome to the show, Aneesah.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And before we jump in, could you just give me a little bit of information about your background? Let everybody know like how you built your career, how you got here. Tell us about you.
Awesome. Would love to. So, I started my career in the music industry. I went to USC, fight on, and majored in music industry and came out of school during the time where the music industry was pretty much taking a nosedive because it was being disrupted by technology. We all recall Napster and iTunes and all that good stuff were destroying the CD was the whole thing, and there were no jobs to be had. So I came out, was devastated that I couldn't find a job, and decided to start my own experiential marketing company with a friend of mine who graduated from Berkeley. And she and I really wanted to change the nightlife industry. So we did experiential marketing in the nightlife industry because we felt it was sexist and racist and all the things, and we really wanted to change that. So we marketed to millennials at a time where people didn't even know what millennials were. We were using a tiny little platform that all of our friends were on called Facebook, and we were doing digital advertising on this platform probably before Facebook even knew it had a digital advertising platform. And we did that for about 6 years, and we worked with charities and organizations, and we built these socially conscious nightlife events, and it was absolutely amazing. And during that time, actually, I finally landed a role at my very first record label, which was the Disney Music Group. Let it go, let it go. So I worked for the Walt Disney Company, and I was supposed to be there for 2 years, starting in sales administration. And 8 years later, which is a total Disney way, I just got stuck there and did a lot of different things. I moved on to do international marketing, and I ended my tenure there in strategic marketing and promotions, where I was charged with building partnerships with third party brands, Disney divisions, and our artists and soundtrack releases. So I worked on everything from Frozen to Gardens of the Galaxy to Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, Zendaya, and Miley Cyrus. So all those artists started at Disney, which is pretty awesome to see where they are today and that they're still thriving and making a lot of money and having a huge fan base to this day. So, pretty awesome stuff. And then from music, I pivoted actually into consumer packaged goods. So I went to business school and decided to get my footing in more traditional marketing and did an MBA consultancy at PepsiCo on the Tropicana brand, which was amazing. And then from there, I was the head of marketing for a CPG startup in the coffee industry. And then out of CPG, I actually pivoted to mobile gaming. So I worked for a company called Jam City, which was founded by Chris DeWolf, who was the founder of MySpace. So wondering where that guy went. He went on to the mobile gaming industry and did very well there. And so I was the director of product marketing there and did that for a couple years on their legacy titles. And then I pivoted from mobile gaming to physical games, so tabletop and card games at a small high growth startup called Exploding Kittens. Some of you may have heard of them. They build card games, and were also disrupting the card game and tabletop industry, and went there during COVID and helped scale their marketing team during a very high growth time when everybody was playing games because we were all in quarantine. Meanwhile, I was working 50, 60-hour weeks. So it was pretty awesome. And yeah, and then from there, I decided to take all the things that I loved about my experiences in brand and marketing. And on top of that, while going through those experiences, one thing that was consistent with me was my work with diversity, equity, inclusion.
We embrace this diversity in terms of the richness of what we can bring to our organization. It's only going to make us better in terms of our products, our services, our processes.
So I was always a part of an employee resource group. I was the founder of employee resource groups. I was an executive sponsor of an employee resource group, specifically with Black employees or women. And I just wanted to take that sort of that passion and that interest of mine and combine it with my love of marketing. And so I started my own brand consultancy and called Monarch, and I basically do this work now for not just one company but multiple companies, including startups.
Amazing. A term came to mind when you were describing your background. And I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Renaissance Soul.
No, but I want to. I'm adding that to my list.
Yeah, you sound a lot like a Renaissance soul, endlessly curious. You've learned so many aspects of marketing, as a brand thought leader, and also just as a business person. And then I think it's kind of fascinating how all of those experiences wove together to create what you're doing now, which is really cool.
Yes, for sure. It's so funny that you say Renaissance because I told myself a few years ago that I wanted to be a Renaissance woman. And in addition to doing brand and marketing and the D&I work and going from mobile gaming to tabletop games to CPG to music industry, I also released an album. So talk about Renaissance. Like I was also sing and I'm an artist. So I'm all about being multi-passionate and multi-dimensional when it comes to your interests and curiosities, for sure.
Amazing. That's a pretty impressive journey. I want to unpack a couple of things, but first I want to say thank you about the Frozen music from my daughter, and no thank you from me, because if I have to listen to Let It Go one more time, I think I'm actually going to let it go and maybe run away, because that song, kids can't get enough of it.
I know.
Yeah.
I was listening to that song a year before it even came out. Like I was
Oh, really?
we were like playing Let It Go in the office. Imagine people just blasting it a year before the soundtrack even dropped. The movie came out, and I was just like, oh my gosh, if I had to hear this song one more time, and then it comes out and it's like everywhere, and I was like, I was dying. But
yeah, well, you've done your job well. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I think is really interesting here is, music is a very experiential industry. It's I'm sure as an industry, it has things to learn in other aspects. But one of the things that I see is like, for instance, the Taylor Swift craze, like the Swifties and things like that. It's very tribal, it's very experiential, and brand means a lot. And so one of the reasons I think that your background is just so interesting is because you fundamentally came from an area that really gets that music isn't just the thing. It's not just the product. It is the whole tribe and experience around the product. And that is your brand. That's how you're making people feel.
Yep.
And so, being able to bring that knowledge and understand it in the context of building a business and driving revenue, I think is really valuable for all kinds of companies, but especially startups and tech companies.
Yeah, no, it is definitely the one thing that I love about music is that there is this emotional connection with in the case of an artist, right, with your fan, your listener. And with brands, sometimes I think a lot of startups and companies don't realize the power of that, right? And so about what it means to build that emotional connection with your target audience, with your consumers. And music does that in a way that is just so profound. And also, if you think about the music industry and artists, right? You have the creative piece, but you also have this piece of like this thing of like basically integrating into people's lives, right? You're listening to your favorite song with your partner, right? And you're on this road trip. And whenever you hear that song, you're reminded of that road trip, right? And of the person you were with and that experiences and the feelings that come up, right? It just brings up all these other memories for you. And I think the same thing happens, it can happen with a product and service, right? It's like, how do you integrate into the lives of your consumers so that you become a part of their every day or whatever, their every month or their overall life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, what helps you stay top of mind, right? And I think that's what also creates that loyalty.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I've actually, it unpacks something, or, starts to pull a thread for me. Because part of what you said there is like every time your customer has an interaction with your brand or is reminded of your brand or your company, they're going to remember something. So what are they going to remember?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to feel something, they're going to remember something. And that's why experience is so important. The brand experience is so important, because creating those memories that, instantly pop into your head, whether you like it or not. When you hear of a company, like that's basically what it does for you. Interesting. So you're talking a little bit about emotional connections. I want to unpack that just a little bit. So how do you typically go about helping a brand build emotional connections with their customers?
So how I go about creating, helping companies create emotional connections with their consumers is, one, first understanding who your consumers are, right? So really understanding your target audience, and not only how the problem that you're solving for them, but also who they are, making sure you see them. And this ties into, I think, thinking a little bit more broadly about your audience. Um, it's not just about, okay, this is what they have in common, what their interests are, but also what differentiates them, right?
Yeah.
And doing so in a way that's really engaging and thoughtful. And also consistency, right? So making sure that you are thoughtful about your brand, and that you are recognizing all of your consumer touch points, and that your brand and your messaging and your and the way you show up in front of them is consistent and authentic, and, to be honest, like, and also honest, right, in that way. So I think that is really the way to build emotional connection. I think it's even under what they're, outside of the problem that you're solving, but what are some of the moments they're having in that life phase, right? If you're looking at age groups, right? If you're looking at race and ethnicity, what are some of the cultural moments that you can tap into? It's just going a bit deeper than just, here's my product, here's my service, and you should purchase it.
One of the things that you said there is make sure that you really see your customer, right? Like make sure you really see your customer.
Mm-hmm.
And I, I'm wondering what do you mean by really see your customer? Like how do they know, cause some brands, okay, let me back up a little bit just so I can clarify the question. Some brands will be like, okay, well, we know this about our customer. This is their demographic. This is how much they make. They tend to be this gender or that gender, or whatever. They tend to have like 3 kids, and it'll kind of be like surface level facts. And that's not really seeing someone, in my opinion. Like, I don't know how I'd build a campaign off of those surface level facts. So like, how do you help brands like really see who their customer is? Like, how do you do that?
Yes. Well, I think it's about investing in consumer research, like consumer insights, and going and having the focus groups, actually sitting down and talking to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that surface level data, and bringing the actual people in, right? And talking to them, asking about not only your product and how they interact with it and how it integrates into their lives or service, but also what's happening in their lives, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yes.
what are the adjacent things that are happening in your lives when you're using your product? What else are you doing? What were you doing before? What are you doing after? What are some of the experiences that you're going through right now? What are some of your
Yeah.
challenges right now, right?
Yeah.
It's actually engaging and talking to people. And I think it's so easy to sit behind a computer and look at an Excel sheet, right? But it's
Yeah.
doing the work to actually go out and conduct, interviews and do the actual research, and doing that not just once, but continuously, right? Like that should be happening as often as possible, because trends are changing, needs are changing, right? And so you
Yeah.
always have to make sure that you develop that relationship. So I'm working with them to say, here, we should bring on this agency, we should conduct these surveys, we should do this focus group, right? And we should be doing it consistently. And then we should take this, and then we should look at how we can apply this information to our marketing efforts.
Yeah. When people tell me that their go-to-market ecosystem or strategy isn't working, I always like start with like, well, how many of your customers have you had a beer or coffee with in the last year?
Yes.
Like not just even
Yep.
like, the focus group is one thing and the more formal setting is one thing. And depending on your,
Yeah.
like who you're working for, like that can work. But like, I have gotten away from even bringing people into the office. Like I've been at the point, and I've been working largely B2B. So that's part of it. So it's easy to ask someone who's the head or a decision maker or an ideal buyer, like, hey, can I just take you out for dinner or whatever? And, you're not like grilling them the whole time. You're building a rapport and then getting that information about their lives. Like you said, I mean, to your point, it's so important to understand every other thing that's going on in their life, because that is also going to affect their buying decisions.
Exactly, 100%. And as a startup, right, you may not have the budget to bring in a huge, to do a huge focus group and everything else. But like you said, you should always be talking to your customer. Like you're
Yeah.
out all the time, right? You're doing things. Like I'm sure there's family members that could potentially be your customer, right? You should
Yeah.
always be curious and asking questions, and then also watching people interact with your product. Like
Yeah.
if you're offering a product, right? Like, are you actually watching people like work with your products, see where they're struggling, see what lights them up, what sort of, makes them confused? Like, are you getting that like real time data and that real time feedback?
Yeah, that's brings up a really interesting point, which is your brand experience is not just a part of your marketing program, right? And I think that it gets like
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, well, brand investment, it helps marketing. The ROI should all be seen as marketing, marketing spend, what's the marketing, but your brand experience should truly like be present throughout the entire journey, the entire time that they're a customer. It doesn't end as soon as they send you a check or hit purchase. So how do you explain that to founders, like what the brand experience is and how it translates through different stages, from like brand awareness through the decision making process on purchase through the entire time that they're a customer, and all the way to affecting their ability to be retained as a customer, their retention. How do you kind of make that clear for people?
Well, that's a really good question. I think it's especially working with startups, it's so easy to ignore brand. It's so easy to go straight to like the product and the service and think that brand is so squishy and you just want to, get out there and start making the money. And so the first thing I say to them is like, brand is your foundation.
We're helping them position their brand, their company, their product or service in a specific place in their client's mind.
It's what's going to create the loyalty, and what's going to create the referral, and what's going to ultimately make your marketing more effective, and honestly lower your CAC in the end, right? Like, because if
Right.
people are going out and they're doing the work for you because they have such a great experience with your brand, and they know your brand, and they can articulate that to other people, right?
Yeah.
They're doing my job for me, right? And that's what we
Right.
want. So if you incorporate that at the very beginning, and that goes as far as like, thinking about your brand architecture, right? I think a lot of companies think about it later, and then they have to make major changes after they already have some sort of following. But it's like at the beginning, it's like, what are your values? How do you want to set this up? Are you a house of brands or a branded house, right? Do you see yourself, where do you want to be in 5 years from now? And how does the brand sort of show up, right? And then the second piece is all right, now that you sort of understand what your values are, what you want your brand to look and feel like, and how you want to be perceived in the minds of your customers, then it's like, all right, how do you show up across all their different touch points, right? So like, and making sure that that is consistent, and then staying true to that. I'd say, being like being really strict about it. And I think Disney is a great example. And I know it's like, many companies aspire to be as brand focused as Disney is, but like, they do not let up on brand. That company is brand driven,
Yeah.
and they are meticulous about their brand at every single touch point. And so
Yeah.
I say, if you are started thinking about that, when somebody's on your website buying a product, how is the brand showing up? When they're interacting with customer service, right? What's that tone of voice, right? Like, making sure
Mm-hmm.
that it's consistent in the things that they're reading in your emails, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
all of that. It's that personality that they're seeing and they're feeling. And
Yeah.
so, and then it's like, and then it's also understanding that when they are now bought in, they're buying the products, they're engaging with the services, that they understand the brand, and they know what you're about. They know what the value proposition is. They know what you value, and then they can go out and they can be your brand ambassadors. They can tell their friends and family and neighbors all about it, and they can do that easily.
Yeah. I don't know what Disney's mission statement is. I've never Googled it, or I don't know if it's released publicly, but that brand experience, like I just took my 3-year-old to Disney for the first time. And she's a princess girl, as we previously mentioned with the Frozen
Mm-hmm.
soundtrack. But it's like they have every single thing. It's not so like, obviously the logo's iconic. Right. And now all the little
Mm-hmm.
sub brands, the different princesses, different show, different themes are iconic as well. And kind of like a little bit of a house of brands. But every single touch point when you go to Disneyland, it's like the person that takes your ticket is like,
Yes,
we're happy you're here. Have a magical day. The line at
exactly.
the queue to meet Princess Jasmine is like, has all kinds of frills and things like that. You're not waiting in line. You're having an experience. It's like all of these tiny little touch points. As a customer, I've already paid for my ticket.
Mm-hmm.
They've already got my money, but they're
Yep.
building that relationship and those memories in a way where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, well, it's my daughter's birthday. Of course she needs a Princess Jasmine outfit. And of course she needs, whatever, because she has that beautiful memory, and it's interesting to me that people who, as human beings buy into the value of brand experience on a B2C level, then kind of like don't understand it or get a little bit tripped up when it goes to a B2B level. So how do you, like, for your customers, like, how do you explain the differences or the similarities between B2C and B2B brand experience?
That's I really think when it comes to B2B branding, that's focusing on building trust, credibility, and just sort of rational decision making, right? Because within your, like, showing that you can build that trust, showing that your brand has that credibility. Because if you think about B2B, your customer, right? There's more sign-offs, the sales cycle is longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are usually investing a lot more money, right? And so they want to work with companies and products and services that they know are going to deliver, because they're usually companies and they have their own brands, right? And they're trying to
Right.
deliver that quality too. So it's all about showcasing that. And then with B2C, it really revolves around that emotional connection, sort of lifestyle aspirations, right? And this sort of mass appeal.
Yeah.
And then that sales cycle is a lot shorter, right? Because there's only usually one decision maker, and it tends to be
Right.
like, that sort of what is it, compulsive buying, right? And so you get that person in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really the big difference between B2B branding and B2C.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like you need a better brand experience for an even longer period of time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because your sales cycle is going to be longer. So you've got different types of touch points, but you've got, even more of an opportunity to impress them, really.
Yes, and it's really relationship driven too, right? On the
Yeah.
B2B side.
Right.
And I think in a more direct way, right? It's like building relationships, and I think what they do both have in common is word of mouth, right? So it's like when you build up a great reputation and you're doing great work, and your company, your brand stands for this, and your other customers are saying, yes, I had a great experience with them. I love working with them. They delivered. They're highly credible, and I trust them to do what they say they're going to do, right? And to deliver that quality. And then having other people say that and infusing that into your relationships is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say too, that interaction with that salesperson, it's really important which salespeople that you hire. Because if you, as a
Mm-hmm.
B2B company, especially because if you give them this beautiful experience and then they hire salespeople to, chase the sale after the demand has been created and that person's behavior doesn't align with that brand experience, you've just broken that
Yep.
experience, right? So it's like almost this
Yeah,
added
right.
pressure. Yeah.
And the
I'd
trust.
let
You've just broken the
Yes.
trust, actually, right? Because, like, as a branding team, right, you've set up this trust, like, this is what we stand for. You've established that, and then they interact with sales, and they have a sleazy sales guy or some
Yeah.
rude sales guy, and then the trust is broken, right? It's like, oh, well,
Right.
like, I can't trust what they say.
Right, absolutely. Or it gives me pause, right? It gives me
Yes,
pause. And then I'm
yes,
thinking like, oh, well, I still need this service. And it's especially tricky if you're in a competitive space because then they've got other options and they've recognized that they have the
right,
need. And maybe you've spent the dollars to help them recognize that they have the need for your product or service. And then if they've got a weird interaction during the sales cycle, if it's, a longer sales cycle, all of a sudden they're like, well, I
mm-hmm.
still need this product or service, but I'm not really sure about this company anymore. Let me look at my other options. So then you're actually you've got like negative ROI on your effort because you
Yep,
broke it at the end, which is really,
exactly.
super tricky. I want to pivot just a little bit. And we talked about your experience with Disney and PepsiCo and how, brand experience affects buying decisions, across the board, B2C and B2B. You mentioned that you pivoted to help these companies understand DE&I and like what role that plays in the brand experience. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got there, and then also in general how companies should be thinking about DE&I as part of their brand experience today?
Yes, well, I got there as an employee.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a Black woman working in corporate America is how I got there.
Yeah.
Um, and going through my own experiences facing bias and microaggressions and all the things, right? And discrimination and all the things that happen, um, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
so I took a role as in the organizations to try to better my own experience and the
Mm-hmm.
experience for people who look like me.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's like I think one thing when we think about brand, we think very external. And
Mm-hmm.
there's also a huge internal component, right? Too.
Yes.
Because your brand not only attracts customers, and consumers, it also attracts top tier talent,
Mm-hmm.
and people want to work for brands that they love. I mean, that's the thing. And then when they're inside of that brand and they're working for it, they want to have an amazing experience. They want to have a great experience. They want to feel like they belong. They want to feel like they're valued, that they're seen, that they're recognized. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think working with employee resource groups, establishing them in organizations, as well as sponsoring them as an executive, had really helped me see, all right, there's a two-part process here, right? There's the internal experience in this organization, and then there's the external side of it. And even doing my own work as, sort of dealing with my own sort of self-limiting beliefs that come with having experienced or being inside of this society that has systemic racism. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that a lot of the images and the messages that I've seen that made me have certain beliefs about myself came from
Mm-hmm.
marketing messages, came from
Mm-hmm.
images that I saw in marketing. I think we kind of go straight to the media and like, oh, television, they need to do better, and you know, and films, they need to do better. But actually, I think marketers need to do better, because I can't escape marketing. I can't
Mm-hmm.
escape, you know, turning on the TV and seeing ads, turning on my computer and seeing ads, walking down the street and seeing ads and signage and everything, right? It's all around us. And
Mm-hmm.
so it has the power to perpetuate a lot of the stereotypes and um and yeah, and the a lot of the issues that people are facing today. And so
Mm-hmm.
as a brand, I think going on an external side is thinking about, again, really seeing the consumers and seeing their communities, right? And cultivating community and realizing that the messages and the images that you put out there do matter beyond
Mm-hmm.
revenue, beyond your product, beyond your service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Every company is, by doing your job, by making money, doing whatever you're doing to make money, right? Every company is
Hmm.
leaving some impact on the world. If
Yep.
you're just selling like a silly little product on, or inconsequential, it seems, product on Amazon, you're still leaving some sort of, all the way up to the big companies, that are really affecting our lives in a more significant way. Like everybody's leaving some sort of impact on the world, and there's no way to get around that. And so, like, it's interesting to me because this to me is not a divisive issue. Like this is not about being woke or anti woke or whatever. Like it's not, you don't have to it's not one side or the other. Like for the people who don't want to make a stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion because it's the right thing to do, if you're a good business person, it makes good business sense, you know? And that's kind of the thing. It just makes good
Yeah.
business sense at this point. So it's like, even if you're not doing it because it's the right thing to do, right? Like, do you care about
Yeah.
making money?
Yeah, exactly. The more people you connect with, or the more people you sell to, right? The more people you can
Right.
connect with, the more people you can sell to, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, and it's all about forming that connection. And you cannot form connection if you do not take an interest in who people are
Yeah.
and who they
Yeah.
are, right? And if you're, so like that is like, that's how it goes. It's not about like, you know, being woke or, like you said, anti woke. It's just about like, it's about just being human and wanting to connect with people.
Right. Absolutely. I'm currently still working on editing my manuscript for my book, and the way that I described it in the first draft, I have since edited it, but the way that I described it in the first draft is you can't build a successful brand while external brand while internally acting like a shitty company. Like I think that there was
100%.
this belief that, like, what goes on behind closed doors is one thing. And, if there are any slip ups, we can offer severance or whatever, do these, take legal actions to cover it up. But what we project externally can be different and things like that. And it's just, people are empowered with their own media outlets that they can create from their pocket now. It's like,
Yep.
it's the world. Individuals have become too empowered to try to fake your way to having a strong brand. You have to actually be living by your values and things like that now.
Yes, exactly. It has to be a part of your DNA, right? Your company's DNA. And it's like, because whatever you do externally, if you are corrupt and, and jacked up on the inside. It's like, imagine that you go, you're like, have this great experience as a consumer of this brand, and you get hired at the company, and then all of a sudden you get inside the company and you're dealing with like microaggressions and discrimination and all these things, and you're like, wait, what? It's just
Yeah.
like, that's like almost worse, right? It's like a
Yeah.
horrible thing.
Yeah. And a lot of people have experienced that. There is when I was in creative agencies, I worked for a very prominent female lingerie brand. I'm not going to put their name specifically on blast, but they were very prominent at the time. And I remember like they were kind of defining body image in the era, which they were defining body image in a way that was very detrimental to a lot of women. And then I remember like looking up their executive board at one point, and I was working, doing creative and brand work for them as a, just someone working for an creative agency that they've hired. And I remember just looking it up and being like, oh, everyone leading this company is a guy, and they're actually selling to women. They were almost the only viable option for intimate apparel at that time. And they're creating a world where these men at the top of this business are defining what it means to be a beautiful woman. And there's been, research since then, but this was like the early 2000s. And I remember thinking like, there's something wrong with that. And I think that a lot of us, like it's your customers, whether you're B2B or B2C, are making judgments. They are, whether it's overt or subconscious, like they're judging your actions all the time, and the actions are pretty transparent now. So, if you've got a female product and you don't have any women in your leadership, that's not going to be a good thing.
Oh my gosh, yes, right? It's like and that's the thing, another part of marketing is thinking about the teams, right? It's like your team should reflect the world, right? They should reflect your consumers in many ways, right? And so like it's hard if you have all these, if you're you have a brand that's focused on and a product that's focused on women, and all the people, decision makers and stakeholders are all men.
Yes. Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
Yeah. Or the marketing team is all guys making decisions about what women want.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and not a single woman.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're never going to, make the wrong decision by having more diversity of thought at the table. Like one of the ways that the tech industry specifically tends to lack diversity in my experience is socioeconomic diversity. So like a lot of the people, as a woman working in tech, a lot more women work in tech now, and I'm a white woman. So, that comes with a certain amount of privilege, which I'm very, very aware of. But, I grew up in a different atmosphere, right, than a lot of my counterparts. A lot of them had, parents who were white collar professionals, and and I was like first generation ever go to college, the only one out of my extended family to ever get a graduate degree. You know what I mean? And so like I'm coming from a different world, and like statistically speaking, more people in America at least grew up the way that I did than grew up the way that a lot of these like other leaders did, which is not a bad thing, but you have to have, people at the table with different experiences in life, so that when you're trying to reach people, you can really understand their perspective, and you've got leaders from different walks of life helping you understand that perspective. I don't know if companies value that enough yet. Like, I don't know if they're there. What do you think?
I think, I don't know if they're there. I don't know if, honestly, like people are there, because I always say like the best way to really understand the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion is to look at your own life.
Yeah.
Right. Because the thing is, a lot of these leaders say, well, we want more diversity, but we just don't know anybody. Like, right. And like, we end up hiring the same people because they're in our network, right? Like I know someone who knows someone, and it's all the same people. And so, well, change your network.
Yeah.
Right?
That sounds like a you problem.
That's a you problem, right? Like let's do some inventory on your own life, right? And the people that you associate with, and like maybe you should branch out a little bit, right? Like when you've worked with colleagues and different people, did you ever try to form meaningful relationships with other people that didn't look like you, didn't come from the same background as you know, had a different perspective? Like, did you try to bring them into your network, into your fold, so that in the future you could consider them a friend, a call, you know, someone that an associate, someone that you could call on later to say, "Hey, I have an opportunity for you."
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And just cultivating a love of people, like a love of connecting
Yes,
with people from all backgrounds in your personal life, then
yes,
actually affects your leadership. It changes the way that you lead, you
a
know?
100%, a hundred
Yeah.
percent. No, that is something that I personally value is cultivating relationships with people who are just different from me. I have friends that come from all walks of life, and I love that. I from different ages. I have my best friend is one of my best friends is 60 years old. I
Yeah.
love like I just love having from I have friends that are from different countries, friends that are from friends that are from different backgrounds, have different identities. And it's like, and I love that because I love one thing is I love the stories. I love the storytelling. I love hearing how people grow, how they grew up and what matters to them. And yeah, and
Yeah.
I find it so inspiring and I learn so much from it. So I think changing the way we view our friendships and our relationships and who we build those friendships and relationships with is the first step.
Yeah. So who do you think, like, if you could point to like a brand or company or two, and if you can, like, give me a big company and a little company or a startup or something who are really getting DE&I right when it comes to, making sure it's creating a great, making sure it's there, making sure that it's reflected in the internal and external brand experience. Like, who should we be looking at?
Well, I actually think that Etsy is doing a
Yeah.
great job when it
Yeah.
comes to D&I.
For the life you're making, Etsy has it.
As far as I think from the brand side, I haven't heard anything regarding internal relations with them, but I love their Gift Like You Mean It campaign. That I thought was
Hmm.
so inspiring as someone who has a name that's hard to pronounce and going through the
Yeah.
struggle of never seeing any nameplates or any sort of when you see like hats that have there already names on them, like my name will never be on that hat. You know what I mean? Like I'll never have that experience, right? Or going and people like going to Starbucks and having to change my name because nope, there's a chance that the person will not spell it right or get it right. And I love that the campaign where they actually with Etsy, like you can get that personalization, right? And you can be seen. And I love that they like tapped into like their value proposition and how it can help all types of people, right? And so
Yeah.
I thought that was a great way, a great campaign, and a great way of tying in what they do and how they can help.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. That's a really great example because you just tied in the three things, right? It's like brand experience, also diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also, really listening to your customer because they would have
Mhm.
had to really listen and have like a conversation with people who, like might have a unique name. My mom spelled Natalie with two E's when she filled out my birth
Mhm.
certificate. And it is one of the reasons I shortened my name to Nat because it was never going to be correct on
Yes, right?
anything ever. It was always, so I was just like, just call me Nat, and that is like a very specific niche experience where you would really have to be listening and caring about people
Yes.
to like have heard that and then realize that, oh, that is something that is an aspect of diversity, right? People who have non-traditional names or unique names. And, also it's part of their identity and like whatever, that's a tiny thing that means so much because it's so specific to the consumer. Um,
Yeah, and it's a pain point. It's a pain point, right? It's like,
yeah,
oh, it's like kind of like, yeah, I didn't realize that it is kind of frustrating when people can't pronounce their name or when you want to go buy a nameplate or a hat or a shirt that has your name on it and there's never an option for you, right? And you're like, oh, like, how does that make you feel? And it's like, well, we actually can provide that for you. Like we can
right.
see you, we have something for you, right? And and sparking that positive emotion in them. I think that's such a beautiful thing and super smart. And
Yeah.
by the way, it's like really common too. I think a lot of
Right.
people struggle with that, right? Like,
Right. Especially with millennial parents. Like we've all given our kids pretty unique names. So it's only
yes,
going to
exactly.
it's only going to become more prevalent. Interesting. Well, is there any shining startup that you have worked with or not worked with, or any smaller company that you think is on the right path right now that you want to highlight?
I will say one of my clients, they're called Doing the Most Games, and
Mm-hmm.
they are a Black-owned gaming company in the tabletop gaming industry, and I think they're really doing it right because they have the best intention. They're really thinking about their brand and how it shows up.
Whether you're a world famous diva, a shower superstar,
I just wanna dance with somebody,
or just a music fan, Song Survivor is the game you and your friends need.
And they're focusing on what I call cultural enthusiasts. So they have games that are made for the culture and for Black culture, but then they're
Mm-hmm.
developing games that are that anyone can enjoy as long as you appreciate culture. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really smart. I think it's really interesting. They are relating and reaching out to so many different uh like there's so many different people as far as like looking at their target audience and really seeing them and saying, okay, going beyond that surface level, and I'm helping them say, okay, how do we really talk to them and find out how we can tap into their life, right? And make
Mm-hmm.
sure that our brand represents that, like that they see our brand as a person and a person that they want to engage with and that they want to share these experiences with. And so the great thing about games is that it's all about fun, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so with them, it's all about connection, and they want to be a part of part of helping people connect to each other and
Mm-hmm.
helping people connect to their brand.
Basically, I have worked in 3 industries in the past, helped build startups in 3 industries that traditionally have lacked diversity, but also have lacked an appreciation for brands. And I want to make sure that everyone gets some takeaways if they, can remember some high level things. So the industries I've worked in where I noticed this specifically were aerospace. I've worked for some aerospace tech companies, and they had a problem even hiring female engineers. And they, obviously they had a really hard time finding people from different backgrounds, ethnically, socioeconomically, et cetera. It was very hard. And then I think that the finance, like fintech, still is catching up when it comes to DE&I. And then also cybersecurity. I helped a cybersecurity company, and that cybersecurity company, cybersecurity as or deep tech or whatever, is very, male dominated. So I've grabbed 2 pieces of advice from what you've said. So the first piece of advice that I'd grab, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the first piece of advice I grabbed was, have a look at your personal network and your personal methodologies for reaching out and connecting with people. And if you want to start becoming more inclusive in your business, start with your personal life, which I think is an amazing, amazing tip. I've actually never heard anyone say that before. So that's the first thing that I grabbed. The second thing that I grabbed was spend that time really getting to know and connecting with your customer on a deep emotional level. That's tip number 2, just because we like things in 3s. If you could offer one more tip for a leader working in like maybe an industry that's still catching up a little bit, what would you tell them?
I would say to make a personnel and financial investment in DE&I, meaning
Mm-hmm.
hire that chief diversity, equity, inclusion officer, or at least a VP level, and
Mm-hmm.
give them a budget
Mm-hmm.
to start to shift things around and make sure that they are integrated into the business and that they have authority and influence.
Mm-hmm. And if there's a smaller startup, contractors exist, right? Like, what is that,
Exactly.
what does
Yep.
that look
If
like?
you are small, yep. If you're a smaller startup, hire you have usually startups have advisors, right? Hire a DE&I advisor. Bring on a consultant. Bring on just an advisor, someone to help you in an advising capacity, just so you could start making sure that this is a part of your DNA from the beginning. Like it's so much easier at the beginning. It's so much easier.
It's so much easier. You mean to start from when you're small,
To
like
start.
start thinking
Yeah,
about
from
this.
when you're
Yeah.
Yeah, it start from when you're smaller, right? When it's like you're a team of 10, right? It's so easier to like integrate it to add it as part of your values. You're starting to scale, you're hiring people, and you have this advisor, you have this consultant helping you with your hiring practices, with what culture looks like. You're building it from the ground up. It's a great time to start. And
It
if
becomes
you're
part
a
of your
bigger company, it's
DNA.
not exactly. It becomes a part of your DNA because then you're not even then you're not even having to like then it's not like something that you have to think about anymore. It's like because it's already you're doing it in every aspect of your business. And honestly you're seeing the benefits from a bottom line perspective too. So
yes. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Even if this isn't something that you're doing for any sort of soft reason, like you're emotionally driven to do it, it makes business sense. You are heading off future issues, right? Because you have thought about this from the beginning. And so by the time you are at that scaling phase, it's not something that you need to go back and correct.
Yep.
So let's pivot a little bit. What I want to ask you about the future, right? Like we know that things are changing rapidly. What do you predict, if you could give me some predictions for the future of both brand experience and DE&I specifically? And if you could throw in something in there about the correlation between the two, what do you see happening coming up?
So I see as far as the future for DE&I, there's going to be a point where companies are going to have to start to walk the talk, I say, where it's like you're going to see companies, organizations that are truly committed to the work and are going to continue to double down on the work. And then you're going to see the companies that are going to continue to neglect it. And what will happen is that the ones that are incorporating it and believe in it and value it will start to see all the financial and consumer gains from it. And that will then shift, I think, industries entirely. Because then it's like, without any doubt that this is working. Like when you start to see the longevity of these companies, right? You start to see the profit margins and all of that, and you start to see the hiring preferences, right? Like that they're getting the best talent because people want to work there, and and the other companies that aren't doing the work are struggling to get good talent, right? You're going to start seeing it in all these different ways, and I think that's sort of where the future is. It's the companies that are saying we have a chief diversity, equity, inclusion officer, and that person has a true seat at the table. They have influence, they have authority, they have budgets. They're not just a figurehead, right? It's not just a box we're checking. It's what we're doing. We really value this. See that being the future, where there's a true. It's not just the people reacting to what was happening during the social justice movement that happened with George Floyd's murder and the murder of many other Black people over the last few years, but it's going to be companies that saying that this is the work that we want to do and continue to do. We are invested.
And do you think there are going to be more and more of these, the companies that are faking it or, internally not really doing the work and externally projecting the other thing? Do you think there's going to be more of these like kind of whistleblower moments as we go forward?
Yeah, I think with with the Gen Z folks.
Gen Z is by far the most diverse generation ever, and we're also the most interconnected around the globe. And part of the reason is, now with our generation, when something happens, the entire world finds out immediately.
They are whistleblowers.
Mm-hmm.
They are watch out. The new wave of workers, they are diverse. They value it. They expect their companies to value it. They are the ones that are going to be your next wave of workers and executives, and they aren't going to tolerate it. They just aren't. So I think the companies that get with the program and that are looking towards the future consumers, future employees, they are going to have to make a real commitment if they want to stick
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think it's so interesting to see this new generation and the way that they're changing the world and making these things even more and more evident, because I feel like when we graduated, when I say that, I mean like us elder millennials, any elder millennials out there listening to this, it's like there was a massive recession and, the world had just started changing. And we were like, I felt just lucky to have a job, like I was like working double the hours and like saying thank you, you know what I mean? And it's just because, the world had not changed yet. But, I see Gen Z out there and I'm jealous / proud because I think we paved the way for them a little bit. I'd like to hope that we did, or we tried at least. And then also, they come at it like, you're lucky to have me, which is, I love that for them. Like, I love what that creates, because then companies are forced to do the right thing,
Yeah, they are waving that flag. I mean, beyond just gender and race, they are talking about mental health, right?
Yes.
And accessibility, and they are going beyond. They're like mental health days matter, right, for us, right? And so they're talking about that kind of stuff, and I think that stuff, that mental health was not an issue, was not a thing when I was working and interning for free and working double the hours and stuff. Like, my mental health did not matter. It didn't matter until I got older, right? But and I realized, oh wait, like, a burnout is real. They're not going to be a part of burnout. Like, they're just like, no, this is not even going to happen to me. And it's your job, my employer, to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, mental health. Like, sometimes our physical health didn't even matter. It was like, oh, you've got the flu. Well, are you dying? Okay, you can still come into the office then. You're fine. Our client needs this by 5 o'clock. Yeah, it's crazy how it's changed. It's awesome though. It's awesome to see. I love hearing your perspective on it. I think it's so important. Thank you so much for the takeaways and everything. I think anyone listening to this, from a larger company down to like a small startup, like, you've given them ways to get started, like, regardless of their phase of business, which is really helpful.
Yes, I hope so. And I also just want to say that you just have to start, right? And it's not about being perfect. It may be imperfect, but I think it's about reflecting and trying and doing better next time, and and just putting in the effort. Like, how you have to start somewhere. So I just say, get started, start doing the work.
Just do it.
Just do it. Just do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. Just do it.
Okay. So to wrap us up here, I like to take a page from Ezra Klein, who has a great podcast and he's an incredible interviewer. So what are 3 books, movies? It could be a series, podcast. What would you recommend to our audience? It could be in any subject.
Well, what I'm currently reading right now is Race, Women, and Class by Angela Davis. I mean, I think it's an amazing book that everyone should read. The movie I recommend is just because it's one of my favorite movies. And I think it sparks existential thinking, which is What Dreams May Come, featuring Robin Williams. It's an oldie but goodie. And then, as far as one of my favorite podcasts, it's Oprah's Super Soul Sunday.
Oh, it's so good.
Yes.
So good.
And any of the episodes with Maya Angelou are always a game changer.
Yeah. Amazing.
Okay.
Aneesah, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I am so appreciative. I know that all of our founders and marketing leaders out there are going to be so appreciative. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm excited to have you in my network and keep connected with you and work together and share ideas and all of that stuff. So sincerely, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.
You've just listened to an episode of Giant Leaps for Brandkind. This is the podcast where I talk to business and thought leaders around the globe about growing businesses through the power of brand. If you want to support this effort, giving me a rating or review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Audible helps so much. And of course, if you're interested in marketing or brand support, you can find my contact information at nattinatlennox.com. That's NATINATLENNOX.com. Cheers.